Hello and welcome to B&B Tabletop, home of the Board and Barrel, a live weekly show where my friends and I, voice actor Kyle McCarley, play board games with a viewer interactive twist we call Buff and Nerf. We officially spun off this project into its own channels and social media and stuff at the beginning of 2022, but we've been doing this show, or some version of it, for almost 5 years now. Playlist is over 200 videos long. I don't know if all of those videos are, I know all of those videos are not full episodes because we had some technical difficulties. Some of them may not even really count as episodes of the show, but it's still a lot of episodes of Board and Barrel. And somehow, we've never done a top 10 video. But that changes today. And I thought it would be fitting for our first list to focus on games that we've played on our show. So, let's get into Kyle McCarley's favorite games we've played on B&B. Number 10. Coming in at number 10, I wanted to give a well-deserved shout-out to a party game from independent developer Josh Soleil, who was kind enough to come join us on the show on July 2nd, 2023, and teach us how to play. It's playable with 3 to 8 players. This game really surprised me, enough that I backed the Kickstarter like immediately after, or immediately once it was available, because I don't think it was available yet when he came to do the show, and I got a copy for myself. The premise is stupidly simple, and what a great first item on our first list video. Because in this game, one player draws a card that tells them to secretly rank a list of items from a wide range of topics. It could be like, there's one card I remember that was like a list of 5 Marvel movies, and you're supposed to rank them from best to worst. Or there's another one that's like, there's a lot of like raunchy, not safe for work cards in there. Like there's one that's like, which of these 5 items is the worst thing that you could shove up your own butt? Stuff like that. And then everyone else at the table has to guess what the rankers' rankings are going to be. But the brilliance in the game is where the title comes from. Once those rankings are revealed, the guessers can then try to convince the ranker to change the rankings. And that leads to a lot of heated debate about a bunch of stuff that just does not matter. And as such, it makes for the perfect party game. When people think of party games, especially adult-oriented party games, the top of the list is often Cards Against Humanity, which is a game that I thought I loved at one point in time before it inevitably got stale. And it's obvious why that game gets stale. The fun comes from reading shock value cards for the first time. Those cards aren't funny the 10th time you're reading them. Change My Mind, I believe, avoids that pitfall because while there are some raunchy shock value cards in there, the fun in this game is in the debate and the shouting matches that ensue when people disagree about a ranking. So as long as you're not playing the game with the same exact group of people night in and night out, you're going to be mixing in some new opinions and new arguments to go with them. So even if you've seen the same card a dozen times, there's still fresh game to be had there. Very fun, very easy to learn, great party game. Number 9. At number 9, I've got a worker placement game we just played on the show April 14th, 2024, Everdell. It's possible that in another year or two, this is going to get ranked higher on my list, but since it's so new to me, I can't go any higher than 9 just yet. It's a 1 to 4 player game. We played it with 4, and again, I was kind of surprised by this one. It's a wildly popular game, and it has been for like 6 or 7 years now, but when I was learning the game and putting together the how-to video for it, I was kind of thinking, I don't know, it seems fine, I guess, but I'm not sure I get what all the fuss is about. And then after playing it, I get it. I went and ordered a copy of the complete collection from Tabletop Tycoon later that night. Sidebar, all their Everdell stuff is on sale right now, actually, if you're interested. In this game, you play as the developer of a new city full of anthropomorphized woodland critters. And the core mechanics are very simple. On your turn, you're going to either place a worker, play a card, or if you can't or don't want to do either one of those things, you're going to move on to the next season. The worker placement mechanic, I mean, that's a tried and true mechanic, but In my experience, I feel like it gets used in a lot of Euro-style games where the theme's not really all that important and the player interaction is fairly limited. I don't feel like that's the case with this game. The theme is all over the gameplay here, and there's a good bit of player interaction outside of just the obvious, oh, I can't place a guy there because Dustin placed a guy there already. And that comes down to the cards that are in the deck. There are so many possible synergies that you can build an engine around with these cards, and so many different ways to score points. The thing that really struck me about this game was that it made me feel smart. It made me feel like I was doing something right every step of the way, just because there are so many ways you can make your cards play off of each other and get an engine rolling. And as a result, it kind of didn't matter to me that I ended up coming in third place because I felt good about the way I was playing the game all the way through. And I think for a mid to heavyweight game like this on a first play, I feel like that's very impressive, especially because even though I love them, I'm not particularly good at board games. Number 8. At number 8, Wonderland's War from Druid City Games, which we played once on June 12th, 2022, and then we did it again as a not-so-great attempt at Versus the Stream, which is a thing where we let viewers control a seat at the table. And anyway, what a fun area control game with a mix of a lot of different mechanics. It's got area control, but it's also got press your luck, deck building, variable player powers, a rondel, and it all ties together in a nice, neat package with killer table presence. 2 to 5 players. I bought into the hype on this one early, but unfortunately not early enough. I had to find a copy with all the deluxe components on a resale group from somebody who'd just gotten their Kickstarter copy delivered, and they'd changed their mind about it. And I bought it having only read about it and watched an early preview video from somebody. At the time, it was the most money I'd ever spent on a single board game, and I had absolutely zero buyer's remorse. The poker chips feel so good, especially when you're doing that like Quacks of Quedlinburg draw mechanic thing. The minis look really pretty, and most importantly, the game is just a lot of fun. It's a little meatier. I wouldn't recommend it for people who don't play a lot of board games. And I certainly wouldn't recommend it when you're relying on text and cameras to tell everyone what you're doing. It really was not great for Versus the Stream. But if you're into the hobby and you're looking for something with a little bit of chaos, a lot of strategy, a lot of different plates to juggle as you navigate executing that plan, and a ton of replay value as you learn all those different mechanics and see how to make use of them playing as different characters against different people, I think this one's a lot of fun. I will say it does not pull off the Everdell effect that I had of making you feel smart on your first game, unless you're Shay Parker and you're just great at board games. But still, it's very, very fun. And I've always been a sucker for the dark and twisted take on Alice in Wonderland. So maybe that's why I love it so much. Great game, lots of fun. Number 7. This next one is currently my only real experience with legacy gaming. And I feel spoiled because I know they can't all be this good. Clank Legacy Acquisitions Incorporated. We let this campaign just take over our show from May 31st through August 23rd, 2020. 3 months. We pretty much only played this game for 3 straight months, and it was so much fun. Clank is a franchise that's had a lot of installments over the years that all iterate on the original concept, where you're an adventurer heading into a dungeon, trying to steal loot before the dragon wakes up and kills you. And to do that, you try to build a deck of cards that synergizes nicely while you try not to make too much noise or clank so as not to wake the dragon. Or you live dangerous and you do make a bunch of noise and then try to get in and get out really fast. It's a very solid deck builder, typically for 2 to 4 players, unless you get the Adventuring Party expansion that adds 5 to 6 players. But it's got a great theme, and it's a lot of fun. What makes Clank Legacy stand out to me, though, is the story. In typical legacy game fashion, stuff is going to happen throughout the course of a game that will permanently change the game board and other components, which will make for a different game the next time you play. And potentially, that could make for a very different version of the game when you finish your campaign compared to what it'll look like for someone else when they finish theirs. But there's also a narrative driving all of that you uncover from interacting with certain stuff throughout the game that doesn't even necessarily have to do anything with scoring points. That story is hysterical, fun to read through together as you're playing the game. And it's all set in the Acquisitions Incorporated universe from the guys at Penny Arcade. So, it's funny. I feel like we did this game a disservice because we played it on Tabletop Simulator, but it was during the pandemic lockdown era. So you work with what you have. I loved it though. And I can't wait to get the sequel when Kickstarter fulfillment happens, hopefully later this year. Number 6. My number 6 is one that I don't think has gotten nearly enough love in the tabletop space, but maybe it's because I'm such a sucker for the kind of twisted fairy tales genre that this game is themed around. The Stuff of Legend, a semi-co-op hidden trader game for 3 to 6 players. We played this one on June 18th, 2023, and I absolutely love it. It's based on a series of graphic novels that at the time I was not familiar with. And after playing the game, I was like, I gotta go read those comics. You all play as toys, and the kid you belong to, known only as the boy, gets kidnapped by the boogeyman and taken through the closet into the boogeyman's domain. And you all have to go through the closet into his world and try to figure out where he took the boy. It's a very challenging co-op game just at the outset, just trying to manage your action economy, your cards, and gather information before you're overwhelmed by baddies or you just run out of time. But to make things even tougher for you, some of your party members may be secretly working for the boogeyman. It's a hidden role game too. With 3 to 4 players, one of you might be a traitor. There's a 50-50 chance that one of you is a bad guy. And with 5 to 6, one of you is definitely a traitor, and there might be a second one. I've only had the chance to play this game once since the show, but I think it's a lot of fun. Maybe a little skewed towards the bad guys in terms of the balance, but the theme is great, and the gameplay it's a fun one. Definitely not one I'd play with mom and dad. It's a bit on the crunchier, fiddlier side in terms of how many mechanics there are to familiarize yourself with, but I think it's definitely still playable with some mid-weight, comfortable gamers. Probably gets a little messy at 6. I think you could pretty easily suffer from too many cooks in the kitchen when you're deciding what the group is going to do. But I think at 4, it's very solid, and at 5, it's really, really fun. Number 5. The next one on my list is surprisingly the only one from my favorite development team that's making an appearance here on this list. Rear Window, from the guys that all recently got laid off from Funko Games. Formerly Prospero Hall, most of that team is now working at a new development startup, Tempest Workshop. Very excited to see what they come up with there. They have a knack for finding fun and unique gameplay based around existing popular IPs. And this was an odd IP for them to pull from. Rear Window, the old Hitchcock movie. But man, this game rocks. It came out in 2022. We played it on a rare 3-player show on August 27th, 2023. I feel like this takes the concept of Mysterium in terms of gameplay, because the theme is obviously very different, but it takes the concept of Mysterium, which is a game I very much love, and puts it into a neater package. Mysterium's a great co-op game that takes, I think, a little too long to set up for what it is. Rear Window streamlines the setup and teardown, particularly just because the packaging is all nice and neat, and it adds a little bit of extra chaos. One player is the director, guiding the other players, the watchers, to try to figure out what apartment unit across the street is home to which resident in that building, and what attribute goes with them. And the only form of communication the director has with the watchers are these beautifully illustrated cards that are very much open to interpretation. I've since played this game with a group that's even bigger than the recommended size of 3 to 5, and it still works. It's honestly a ton of fun having a big group of watchers all debating what the director's cards could mean. And there's a little twist of chaos in that one of the attribute tiles could be a murder. And if that happens, the director is actually trying to steer the watchers toward the correct answers on everything except the murder tile. Now, full disclosure, I've played the game 4 or 5 times at this point, and we've never used a murder tile. And honestly, I feel like conceptually, I don't think that twist really adds that much. And when you're playing the game with new people, you almost don't want to have the element of you may not be able to trust everything I'm telling you. But it's easy to house rule your way around that mechanic, at least until your group is familiar enough with the game to be comfortable trying it. I find it's challenging enough just communicating the information you want to share. And there's almost a limitless amount of replayability with how many different attribute tiles there are to choose from, especially because only 12 of the 20 different options get used at a time. Excellent co-op experience. I highly recommend it. Number 4. Sticking with the co-op theme, number 4 is Chronicles of Crime from Lucky Duck Games. This one first made an appearance on a pseudo episode of the show with Caitlin all the way back on July 5th, 2020. Since then, we've played versions of Chronicles of Crime a couple times, and I've played it off stream several times as well. It is truly a phenomenal co-op mixed medium game. It's billed as a 1 to 4 player game. I think it can work just as well with a couple more people. Mechanically, there's not really any reason to have a limit, but discussions and decisions will get tough if the group is too big. They keep this game very affordable by way of a companion app that does almost all of the heavy lifting. You got a bunch of cards with QR codes on them, a board and some placards to put them on, but the game is pretty much all played within the app. You'll choose a case, and there are, I think, 5 you get for free that are playable with just the base game's components, and a slew of DLC mysteries, expansions, as well as some community-crafted free cases that you can download. And throughout the case, you scan these QR codes to visit different locations, interrogate suspects, and then you also do a little AR/VR investigation of crime scenes on the app. I recommend using a Chromecast or something to display the app on a screen where everyone can see it, and then pass the phone around between players to take turns reading things and exploring things and just keep everybody involved. Also fully playable solo, and some of these cases are really, really good. There's a nice scale to the difficulty too. Another game in this genre that I don't love nearly as much is Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, which it's brilliant in concept, but man, those cases get very difficult very, very fast. And at a certain point, that difficulty is just not fun for me anymore. Chronicles of Crime keeps things a little bit friendlier for smooth brains like mine. And with all the extra cases you can get your hands on, the replayability, I mean, it may not be endless, but it's pretty close. Number 3. I'm realizing as I get further into this list that I very much have a type, and it's co-op games. I think everything on this list is very different, but a lot of them share that much in common. At number 3, 5-Minute Dungeon from Wiggles 3D. We played this on the show November 14th, 2021. This is a frantic co-op card game for 2 to 5 players, or 2 to 6 with the Curses expansion that I think is well worth adding to the collection. You all pick a character with a unique power and deck of cards. You start a timer and then frantically play cards all at the same time to beat an increasingly sizable deck of enemy cards and then a boss before 5 minutes runs out. There's a free companion app you can use for the timer with a few narrator choices that you may or may not recognize. Or you can just use any 5-minute timer. Every time you finish a round, you'll have to spend at least that much time cleaning up and dealing cards back to everyone, but you almost need that time to just reset your heart rate. This game is wildly entertaining, and while the first couple dungeons are pretty easy at almost any group size, they get a lot tougher. I've played it at several player counts many, many times since this show. I take it with me almost anywhere I think I might be able to get people to play games with me. And I've never beaten it. I've made it through, I think, level 4 or 5 or something like that. I don't think it's a particularly good 2 or 3 player game, but at 4 to 6, it is just fantastic. Number 2. All right, last co-op game on the list, I swear. Number 2, Return to Dark Tower from Restoration Games. Voice actor Ben Lepley brought over his all-in copy of this one when it was brand new, fresh off the Kickstarter truck on June 5th, 2022, and then I immediately went looking for a copy for myself. When they launched the second run for the new expansion, I pledged for everything. It's a co-op adventure game for 1 to 4 players, based on a game from 1981 that I was somehow unfamiliar with. I don't know exactly what they changed about the mechanics. I know Restoration doesn't shy away from updating and refining things on beloved classics like this one, but what I really think makes this game basically a perfect game, in my opinion, is the companion app. They absolutely could have chosen to go minimalist with the digital elements of the game, just have the big imposing tower and a remote to control it or something, or some buttons on it like the old one was. And then have you tackle all of the enemy actions and stuff by rolling dice and looking up tables in a rule book or something. Instead, they built a phenomenal companion app that automates a ton of stuff that I think would have made this game way too fiddly if it were presented any other way. It's a great blend between the complexity of video games with the comfort of a mid-weight board game and the best table presence you're ever going to see. Having played it with 4 a couple of times now and once by myself, I think it's one of the rare games that works just as well with every player count that it's advertised for. There's a ton of replay value here too, and I think a lot of that comes from the companion app. They couldn't have included nearly as many variables for future plays, I don't think, without the app. And I love that there's a way to load up the exact same game if you just save that world seed. So if you lose, you can try again with what's essentially the exact same game, because there are a ton of variables that all get generated by the app when you start a new game. So fantastic game, so much fun. Number 1, changing things up here with my top pick. It's not a co-op game, it's a social deduction game. Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. We've played this one on the show a couple times. First time was over Tabletop Simulator on February 27th, 2021, which I think was my first time playing the game at all. But I fell in love with this game, immediately bought a copy, and it is the number 1 staple that I travel with. 4 to 12 players, this is social deduction at its best. I used to play a lot of One Night Ultimate Werewolf, which is a great social deduction game. I think Deception scratches the same itch, but better. 1 player is the murderer, and they're going to secretly show whoever the clue giver is 2 cards from the 8 that are in front of them. Everyone else also has 8 cards in front of them, doesn't know who the murderer is, and then the clue giver can only give these vague one-word clues using the placards. So the bulk of the group is trying to figure out which 2 cards the clue giver is steering them toward, and the murderer is simultaneously trying to throw them all off. At bigger player counts, you can work in a couple of other roles that have some minor player powers, but that's kind of it. And one thing that I love about Deception compared to a game like Werewolf is that there aren't a ton of roles with unique powers. It always sucks playing Werewolf when you're like, I'm just a boring villager for the 5th time tonight. I don't know anything. Deception, there's a much more level playing field. And the best aspect of it, I think, is that it doesn't put the bad guy on the spot so much. All the deduction that's happening is focused on what's on the table. It's not focused on body language or on sniffing out the bluff in what'd you do last night. So when you're the bad guy, you can kind of just play the game the same way you would when you're a good guy. You don't have to make stuff up. You just look at the clues, look at other people's cards, and try to convince people that those clues might be pointing to something that's not in front of you. Deception, Murder in Hong Kong is truly a perfect social deduction game. And it's easy to learn, easy to teach. You can play it with anybody. You can play it with a huge group. Highly, highly recommended. And I would be remiss if I didn't include one honorable mention, which is Don't Let It Die, designed by my co-host, Dustin Hendrickson. A co-op game for 1 to 4 players. You play as a tribe of Neanderthals trying to uncover the secrets of the fire that a lightning bolt started on a nearby tree before a flood hits the valley and dooms your tribe to extinction. Very challenging, a lot of RNG that can either make your life easier or impossibly difficult, but it's not so much that you feel like you have no agency in the game. And you can try to track down the Great Games Edition, which was a very successful Kickstarter campaign from that Australian publisher, or you can get Dustin's self-published version from thunkboardgames.com. And while you're at it, you can go sign up for the beta for the digital mobile game and the Steam game that he's working on. So that's it. That is the first top 10 list for this channel. My all-time favorite games we've played on the show. What do you think? Do you like these picks? Was there something you think should have been included that wasn't? Is there something you think we need to play that we haven't yet? Do you hate one of these games that I think is one of my favorites? Let us know in the comments down below. And catch us live every Sunday night at 5 p.m. Pacific. You can find us on the platform of your choice at www.bnbtable.top. Thanks for hanging with me, and I will see you Sunday.